This is a Let's Talk Church Safety and Security microsode with your host, Paul Buckner. Hey sheepdogs, it's Buckner. I wanted to talk about something today. I try to talk about stuff that's pertinent, and I've got some really good friends in the church safety space that we're talking about, hey, there's so many people now vying for the church safety space to have conversations and stuff, and there's so many true experts in the space that there's a lot of the same thing is getting said over and over again. And so I try to come out with content that I feel is either, I don't know if it's unique, but it's maybe fresh, or it's something that I haven't seen, and maybe where things are starting to trend towards, and something to think about for your church. And this is a great way to protect personnel, to protect your people. I talked about drones a while ago. Somebody would need to be willing to invest in a drone, either as the church. It doesn't have to be super sophisticated. It needs to link back with a camera, but having a drone that you could fly out to something. So if you've got a situation where you've got a campus, and I'm going to give you some scenarios. There's a missing child, and you need to be able to get eyes up, and you can get a camera above it. I've worked with churches before that for a lot of their promotional stuff, they will actually do drone shots of their campus at the 4th of July or at other events, and then they take that video content and they put it over. So it's something the church could write off for, or use for a lot of different purposes. But if the understanding was that the drone operator is somebody, or one of the drone operators that's skilled with it, you've got the right licenses to do this. Because if you use a drone for anything other than recreation, then you're technically violating the law. So there's a few steps to get there if you want to honor the law in that sense, and so forth. But the ability to pull it up. So I'm sitting at a complex right now. It's not a church, but I'm sitting at a complex. And let's say that it was a church complex. There's 3 separate buildings on this complex as I sit in the parking lot, and let's say that there was a missing child. Well, this is a small enough complex that if you had people hit all 4 corners of the property line and start working their way in, maybe you've stopped the vehicles and you're checking, like, hey, you don't have an extra kid, like you're, whatever that looks like, over the radio, you've mentioned that there's a missing kid. However you guys do it within your structure, being able to get eyes up and that drone's above it, and they're like, little Timmy is running off the southeast corner, or somebody's got little Timmy under his arm. So that's one thing that a drone could get for you. Another one is an overshot of a car fire in the parking lot. Another one is how to route. Maybe you've got a really large campus and you're trying to figure out how to route first responders to something, or you have a disturbance. In my area, there was a car wreck. It was a massive multi-vehicle pileup. We get these flash freezes in my part of the Midwest, and so the air temperature will suddenly drop with a gust of wind, and it'll go from rain to freezing instantly on the pavement. And all of a sudden, semis, people from all over the country traveling are just slamming into each other. We've had 40 and 60 car pileups before. And so I'm not far from Interstate I-44, and they did a drone view of it, an overflight of that scene, and they were able to tell this is going to be tough. And like, where do we bring in the emergency vehicles to then come through and cut the cables at the dividers or whatever and get to people. And so maybe you have a car fire in the parking lot. Maybe there is someone has stolen something, and instinctively a lot of us want to run after the bad guy and go tackle him. But if somebody broke into a vehicle and they've stolen a purse and you've got a drone up, I'm spitballing here, but what a drone can do for you can actually save personnel. It can save time. And when I say save personnel, if you don't have enough personnel, it's a multiplier. You think in the military you have force multiplication. Well, a little drone can give you force multiplication. And so it's something that you can do with a drone, and they're coming down so inexpensive. Somebody, has stolen something and they're running on foot. There's been a shooting, and you've got a drone that's up and able to see the direction of travel of the person, and you're not risking a human being at that point. I'll give you another one, is a suspicious activity on the edge of the campus. There are now drones that can verbally communicate with someone, and maybe you've got somebody that is an emotionally disturbed person, and they would take a baseball bat to a human being. You can do a 360 of them, come out and say, hey folks, this is Paul, I'm with the security team, just checking on you, is everything okay? And they get belligerent, at that point, or they're like, I actually need help, get an ambulance. You can get a drone if the drone is kept charged up, if it's readily accessible, if somebody's always going to be there that knows how to fly. So those are the things that you have to take into account. But you can actually use a drone for a lot of different things. You've got a traffic flow problem. So let's say that you're in a growing church. I've worked with several growing churches that are really, really growing. God is moving, and the campus is the campus is strained under the weight. You know, the nets are breaking under the load of fish. And you get a drone up and you're looking at the traffic patterns that people are doing. You're able to do something that used to require a helicopter. And so there's a lot of things that, whether it's traffic control management or rushing out to see an emergency, and now drones are even getting to the point that they can handle payloads. So a buddy of mine is working in the agricultural side of things with drones and ranching. So let's say that Paul Buckner's out in the field. You spend a little bit more money on a drone, and these drone prices keep coming down, right? Drones, like it or not, drones are here to stay, and they are. I have misgivings with drones. Drones are already becoming a significant part of warfare, and people can say, well, duh. Just take a peek at what's going on in the Ukraine. Little bitty drones are being used for all kinds of things, from recon to being used as attack weapons. Like, in the last 5 years, what drones are being used for is insane. And now, like, Israel is working on, if they haven't perfected, an ambulance drone that can pick me up and rush me to a hospital so they're not risking a pilot. Drones are really coming a long way. They're looking at drone delivery systems just for things like groceries. Like, to me, it's hard to wrap my mind around, but I think it's something we can actually use, bringing it back home to our level, which is, so let's say you need a trauma kit and you don't have it on you. You've had to run and there's a situation and somebody's injured and they're on the edge of the campus. And, you know, if you have dangerous terrain areas on your campus, running out there to that spot and being able to get a drone up could be, or I'm saying it backwards. So you've got someone who's run out to that spot to help someone, and at that point that they're helping someone, you have a drone that's able to fly in and drop. They literally have drones now that have little cargo bays in them, and it drops open and out drops a trauma kit because they're not that heavy. And so you definitely need something. Maybe you've run out of tourniquets on you. The person has three appendages that are bleeding profusely, and the one tourniquet you're carrying on you is not enough. You know, I feel like we're at the World War I era of aircraft, only with drones, where, you know, all of a sudden it went from airplanes being used for reconnaissance to they were taking pistol shots at each other to they were, I mean, some of them were toasting each other as they were flying and wagging their wings and smiling and waving, to they were shooting at each other. And as World War I progressed, now they're dropping bombs, and you see this major change. Well, this can definitely benefit our church body. And I mentioned this several months ago in a video, maybe a year ago. We're actually coming up on, all the ingredients are there for security cameras, a security system to detect somebody. Facial recognition is going through the roof. And the day is coming very soon where people are going to put this together affordably to where a drone goes off the side of a building. This little door opens and it shoots out on a compound, on a complex, a church campus, whatever, and it shoots out and it circles the person trespassing, and they are like, you know, you are trespassing on this property. You are not allowed to be here. Please leave. The authorities have been notified. And it's doing a 360 view of this person. It can identify if there's weapons. I mean, this is, like, I have seen the technology. I have sat with security experts that have shown me that it can ID guns on people and can tell the difference between a gun and a cell phone. And in a pinch, in a hurry, that's hard for a human sometimes, and especially when somebody's moving fast. And then, so you've got that aspect of it, but that technology is coming very, very quickly, and it's becoming more and more affordable. And so we've actually had some deaths in the last couple of years where church safety personnel have gone out to check on people. One guy was run over. I think another individual was shot. And so if you have a small campus where maybe you don't have immediate backup and you don't have somebody there to watch your back, maybe shooting a drone out to do an overpass and get a look at the thing, and the person turns around and they're verbally aggressive, and they're getting whatever, if it's an emotionally disturbed person, if they've got a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, or if they're high on drugs. Why risk your own personnel that may not have the physical abilities? They may not be healthy enough to go toe to toe. Why fight a fight you don't have to fight? You win 100% of the battles that you don't have to fight. And you can get a drone into an area where that it's a lot harder to get foot traffic. So if you've got somebody that they're like, there's a person out there and they're screaming for help, and you know it's a quarter mile away across your enormous campus, and you go and you shoot a drone out there, and you already have people headed that way, And then the person's like, I fell, something's wrong, I'm bleeding really bad, I need an ambulance. Seconds save lives. So drones can be really, really useful. The second thought I have is related to church safety. This is a miracle. I dealt with a situation the other day, but I'm going to bring it back to church safety. As an officer, I dealt with a situation where we were going to a train versus pedestrian. And typically, I've not had to work one of those yet that was a fatality, but typically those are fatalities, and they're not pretty. People get blown apart. It's just bad. They can be. And so I was with another officer. We were headed that way. I was on duty as a chaplain and an officer, and so going to the scene, and it was above a church. I'm very familiar with the church, and so I want to give you several thoughts about this. Number one, God saved this person's life because they were hit full in the back by a train and flung a considerable distance, and they are expected to make a full recovery. And in the course of that, we prayed on the way, asking God to, please let this person still be alive. Please let them still be intact, because they could be run over. And if somebody loses, let's say that they lose an arm at the socket, it's going to be really hard to wound pack and prevent them from sanguinating, bleeding to death. Same thing with a hip. If their hip is ripped out of the socket, I can't get a tourniquet around that, and I've got to hold as much pressure as I can, and they're going to go into significant shock, and shock's what kills us. So anyway, I was praying that they were fully intact and praying that they would make a full recovery. And the officer next to me is like, amen. We pull in and the person is going to live and expected to make a full recovery. Praise God. All glory to God. It's one of those things where we have to remember in those situations to pray. I don't know that I would have had the bandwidth mentally to drive and do all those things and pray. And so that's a thing. And then following that, I was able to secure permission from the church pastor, who I know well, and they were praying for the man hit by the train. But I was able to secure permission for any first responders that needed to go to the bathroom, because when you deal with certain things like that, you've got a train track that is on your campus, or not on your campus, but near your campus. In that case, their property line butts up against a train track. So you're gonna have a railroad going through there. The chances for something like that happen. It's illegal to walk on train tracks, but people do it all the time. And he was not trying to kill himself, by the way. I think there was a series of things that were going on, but that's conjecture. And he wasn't aware of the train until the last possible second. It was not an attempted suicide, to my knowledge. But so let's say that how many of your churches are next to interstates? I've worked with several churches that are butted up against an interstate, and there are all kinds of security concerns that can come with that. Whether it's a smash and grab robbery and they run back to their vehicle right on the interstate, or they try to steal a kid, they abduct a kid, or they want to run up and shoot at somebody and run back and immediately be able to exfil. And there's a campus that I did a lot of work with, that they were next to a major intersection of two major highways. And if you just went whoop, whoop, you'd be gone and nobody would know which direction you went. And so there are very valid concerns when it comes to that kind of security. I want to go back to drones for just a second, though. We do like security sweeps of our campuses a lot of times when we do door checks and window checks. If you have a large enough campus, you could use a drone and you could do a pass around a building and look for any broken windows. You can look for any doors that are standing wide open. As a police officer, I went to a school compound and we ended up searching a building. It was an equipment storage building for their football team. The door was standing wide open at 0 dark 30. I mean, it was very late at night and we had to sweep the building. That's a thing, that being able to do your security sweeps early. Sometimes you'll have a vagrant or an emotionally disturbed person, or you'll have a dangerous person hiding in a church bus. A lot of church buses are older school buses. They're retired school buses, and you can't shut and lock those doors except from the inside. And so they can push that double door in, and they can get in there and they can close it behind them and have a warmer or a cooler place to spend the night. So doing those security sweeps of your campus is a very good idea, but being able to do a pass around the outside of the building, you could be sitting in your vehicle, warm, cool, whatever the circumstances are. I mean, I froze my tail off and I have sweated through my shirt before church even started. Roll the window down, drone goes out, you're sitting there doing a pass around the campus. That's another thing drones can do for you, is help you to do perimeter checks and door checks and window checks or whatever. Obviously, the drone can't yet jiggle the door handle for you. That may eventually happen. And but going back to this, do you have a plan in place that if, like, your unique situation, there is a gas explosion on this right of way that goes through or next to your property, and emergency vehicles have to come in. I mean, literally, we parked in a lady's yard, and she's like motioning us up to go get up to get to this guy, because we needed room for the big red trucks to get there, because that's got your firefighters and your EMTs and your paramedics on it. And they were able to exfil the guy. It happened on a dead-end street, crammed up behind this church, to where infill's okay, exfil's a problem. If you got to get out of there, it's a problem. So we're having to think about how to facilitate this. And then we literally cut a path from the railroad. Myself and a firefighter cut a path from the railroad with pocket knives, and went over this embankment, because you got the track and you got a ditch and then you got a berm, and then down into this lady's yard. Do you have a plan in place of how you would get emergency vehicles to the tracks behind your church, to the other side of the highway? If there's a major pileup and a congestion, and they can't get through this way, it's like, okay, we're going to move these vehicles, or this is how we would route you in. And then that said, maybe you don't have to route them in, but you look out there, and we were there for hours at this train versus pedestrian situation. And we were initially told to hold the scene, and then we were told, you're working the scene. Fair enough, go take your pictures and do whatever. Well, that means you may have first responders that are very cold, that are very hot. They're going to need fluids. They may need something to eat, and we don't want to be a nuisance. But if they've got a scene commander, and being able to walk out there, depending on how bad it is, and say, hey, my name is Pastor so-and-so, or I'm in charge of the security team. I've been given permission to help you guys any way I can. So, and they're like, we're actually great. And, feel free to scratch your cell phone number on a card and hand it to them and say, we've got bathrooms. Oh, now we're talking. You know what I mean? Because they need the ability to shuck their gear, spend a few quality moments in the bathroom, or minutes in the bathroom, and then go back out. It can be really frustrating in an environment like that, when you're having to go to the bathroom sometimes for hours. It's annoying, it's a distraction, it's a huge inconvenience. And you might notice that police vehicles don't have porta potties attached to them. So when we get into environments like that kind of a relationship that we can potentially have with the first responders and the church can be incredible. And it can be a ministry building opportunity, because they may come back later and say, hey, we've got a retirement party and we don't have the room. Bill's retiring from the police department. Can we hold it at your church, in your fellowship hall? You got an amazing fellowship hall. I saw it that day we were here with the train wreck. That's literally the kind of thing. And they may need to park vehicles overnight, and they may need a place. They may need a place to triage people. Maybe they're having trouble with their cellularly enabled laptops and stuff, and they need to use the church Wi-Fi. Anything that you can do as a ministry opportunity like that it lets us be that good Samaritan. And you just never know when that opportunity might arise, and God may use it for His glory. I mean, in the last week, I've got to brag on God. In the last week, everything is broken loose. The devil's been working overtime, but whatever Satan intends for evil, God will turn to the good. I've given out 6 Bibles. I've had 3 rededications. One of the guys I chaplain, his 2 older sons just gave their lives to Christ. And I've seen 2 relationships restored between a man and a woman. It's just been an incredible journey over the last few weeks. So number one, I covet your prayers. Please pray for me as a chaplain, and especially now that I'm out chasing bad guys. I'm very serious about protecting my flock. Those guys are my tribe. So, and now gals. I've actually got a couple of gals that work with a couple different departments that I chaplain. So I covet your prayers. But it's been incredible to watch God move, and I've had several churches step up with resources during that time, and I cannot explain to you the evils unless you've seen them, unless you're a veteran that's seen combat or seen awful things, unless you're a firefighter or some flavor of first responder. I cannot explain to you the terrible things that people see. We had 2 fatalities from a shooting in our area, and I've talked to several first responders about it. And it's one of those things that we need to be able, as first responders, to off gas and let that stuff go. And I believe that the best way to deal with that is to be in a life-changing, life-saving relationship with Jesus Christ, and that helps me process everything. And so I even had there's a local organization that is helping veterans, and now they've opened up to help law enforcement and other first responders deal with suicide. And that is such a huge thing. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize this. Dispatcher suicide is actually a higher rate than law enforcement. A lot of people get into being first responders because of a trauma, a tragedy, and they want to take that, and they want to be, if it's a Superman thing where they've got to help because no one was there for them, okay, I get it. That can be a lot of it. But then when you realize that you can't possibly save everybody, that can be part of that shock that can happen to a system, to realize I can't save them all. And that it's a humanistic way of looking at it, and we need to look at it from God's perspective, which is the most powerful thing we can do is pray and then show up and just let God use us. So be praying about those things and bringing that back. Think about the opportunity you have as a church if something really terrible happens right there in your community. And they may say no. They may be like, hey, we've got everything. We got a mobile this and we got all that, and food's being brought in. And I'll tell you, bringing it back to what you can do, one of the most tragic things that I've seen is there was a drowning in my area, and there was a huge crew of people out there. It was drowning of a child. And they were alongside this stream, and it had pretty much taken over a rural road. And I showed up and brought a lot of water and like Powerade, Gatorade, things to kind of refresh people. And I had asked about food, and it was years ago, and I got introduced to something I'd never heard about. And the chief he was in charge of part of the scene. I was talking to him, and he goes, "Please don't bring pizza." Okay. Why is that? He said, as a police officer, if anyone sees you eating, and think about this, you're human and you have to eat. If anyone sees you eating, you're a lazy, worthless person. And the news cameras will look over, and they don't realize that those guys have been out for 16 hours straight with no sustenance, combing the woods looking for the missing boy or whatever. They've been in that manhunt looking for that guy that's that serial killer that they're tracking down, and they haven't stopped for 8 or 10 hours. And they see the guy like resting his head back against a chair, and he's eating a pizza. And so he's a lazy piece of crap because he had to stop for a minute because he's human. And it's so true. The reason I mention this is if you have an area that's a fellowship hall area and they can use it as a base of operations, or some of these things are minutes long, some of these things are hours long, some of these things are days long. If you're willing to open up and have that conversation with your pastor, with your board, however that works, if you're willing to have that conversation in advance and say, hey, if something happens, we'd like to be able to offer this, and you can spin it up like that. Just the space, the air conditioning, the heating, the bathrooms. People might need a place for some rack time, and you've got a Sunday school classroom that they can go in and they can crash out, because that person, we had a flood rip through one of our towns, and there were people they had to send a guy home, and he had worked 3 straight shifts. They were 12-hour shifts. He was just done. And as humans, we're not designed to do that. So being able to get some rack time and sleep can be huge. And having a space where there can be food out, it could be just meat and cheese trays. And or maybe somebody's brought some hot foods in and they're still in warmers, crock pot style stuff. It's like as churches we do these potlucks. If that sort of environment is there, and we know that the food is safe, that's a big thing for first responders, is knowing nobody spit in it, nobody poisoned it. There are a lot of first responders who've been seriously injured by poisoning. And if we know that that's a safe environment, and then the news media is not going to be out here taking pictures of Paul Buckner, who's been on his feet for 20 hours, and he's just completely exhausted, and he looks like garbage because he's so worn out, and he's emotionally wrung out because we still haven't found that missing kid. I haven't had to do that yet, thank God, but day's probably coming. And then you're on the news, and people are commenting in the social media posts going, oh my gosh, what a worthless piece of crap that cop is. Look at him. He should be out there working. And people just don't know what they don't know. And it's just a sad truth. I mean, we dealt with a stop the other night where we were dealing with somebody that needed to be off the road. They were very much a danger to themselves and very much a danger to society. The way they were driving was dangerous. And they didn't stop in a safe manner, and we had to take the keys. It was a bad deal. And so we ended up with 3 units, and everybody had dealt with this person. We're trying to get this person long-term help. And I guess dispatch took multiple calls. You could still drive around it. It was not on a major highway. It might take you 11 more seconds, Becky, to get home. But people were calling in going, you need to tell those cops to move. They're blocking the road. No, they're not. Like I made sure that traffic could flow around it, and it wasn't like we were in a standoff with somebody that was a danger. But people seem to forget, because we can be so selfish as human beings, that yeah, it did take you 11 more seconds to get to the store to buy your cigarettes, or it did take you 11 more seconds to get home, because that's all it would have taken. Literally, slow down, look, oh, there's the lane to go right. Slow down, look, oh, there's the lane to go left. But people can be really hateful. And so if we can show that light, in so much as you're able to live at peace with men, by your love will they, the world, know that you and I have been with Jesus. Just a thought. So drones and helping first responders when it comes to major emergencies on or near your campus. God bless. If you enjoyed this microsode, check out the video and audio versions of the Let's Talk Church Safety and Security podcast.